Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Welcome to the climax of this event, where I have the good fortune to be leading a panel discussion with a veritable brain box of IT talent to explore the issue of leading modernization while balancing complexity and compliance. The number one business issue and challenge that you have told us, and that is attracting and retaining talent. And Kith, I am going to go with you. We're talking about modernization. If we don't have the modernization to drive the changes, the talent to drive the modernization, everything is academic. And you published a paper where you said without cloud talent, the value that cloud offers is simply unobtainable. What do you mean by unobtainable, and what do you mean by value?
There are probably two articles to refer to. One is around the estimation of value in cloud over the next decade. And McKinsey published an article that says this is about $1 trillion of value. But actually, we've been spending a lot of time speaking to executives across Australia and New Zealand, and having spoken to most of them and seeing their success stories and challenges, I've come to realize one thing, which is that actually there is no value in cloud for you unless you get your capabilities right. And your capabilities really referring to your people and also your processes, because that is the one thing that gets in the way of actually capturing the value. Most people that don't do that actually end up getting an outcome where the technologies that they modernize to on cloud, it still takes them the same amount of time to do things. And in fact, if anything, it costs you twice as much to run things. So if anything, I would say it's value destroying rather than value creating.
So they pave the cow path, is what you're saying, rather than build a new road. But you also made a quite interesting comment, because you said it is the responsibility of those organizations to grow that talent. Don't go, you've got to look at your personnel and help them evolve them to do that. Coming from an organization that I think we want to engage to provide us that wisdom and expertise like McKinsey, what are you saying then in terms of you need these people?
Well, the reality is quite simple. If you look at talent within your organization, the talent that you have is half as expensive to grow, and it's going to be three times more likely to stay with you and be retained. So it is a no-brainer for organizations to first start with how can you grow that talent internally, especially if you recognize that from a supply supply constraint point of view, most of the high proficient talent that are going to be 8 times, 10 times most proficient, that is the talent that is actually in short supply in market. If you're going to hire externally, most people have roles in cloud for less than 2 years. Almost half of them in Australia have held those roles for less than 2 years. So the better path is always to grow internally rather than to look externally. And your partners can play an important role, but that role isn't to simply be bodies on the ground. That role is actually to bring the best expertise and help grow that talent pool, and grow that talent pool nationally, not just for your country, not just for your company, but I think that's almost a responsibility.
Julie, you had a point to me beforehand about diversity in it, and we look at a room around here today. You probably feel that there's not as much diversity as you might like to see in a room today. Explain your thinking about maybe taking a broader perspective of where this talent lies.
Yeah, it's tough, okay? Yeah, we look across the room. There are not so many women in IT. When I got into this field years ago, I won't say how many, I actually think the percentages were higher. We were about 30%. Now we have about 25% for gender diversity in our industry, and that's just a real shame, because I think they're great roles and great opportunities for women, and a career in IT is fantastic. I've loved my career in IT. But if we keep doing things the same way, we're going to keep getting the same outcomes. We know that. We're technologists.
Yeah.
So, we have to think about new pathways, and yeah.
And how does diversity then build the value, generate the value? Because I think an element of what you're saying, it's not diversity for the sake of it. It actually enhances the production of what you're doing.
Yeah, we find our most diverse teams are our best teams.
Yeah.
In Cisco, that's where we get our innovation. That's when we get our ideas. So not just gender diversity, but all kinds of diverse teams with people coming together. So it's something that we think equates to better outcomes, better products, if you will. So.
Okay, a final question question for bringing Sarath on this issue. How do we stop it just being a lip service tick? I'll bring Sarath in a minute, but Julie, I'll come to you. How do we stop it just being a tick in the box? We're doing this and we're living it. Julie, sorry, that was for you, sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. How do we have it?
How do we stop it being lip service to this? And how do we engage people in doing this rather than doing it for some virtue single? We're doing it actually because we really passionately believe it makes a stronger business.
I think it ties back to value. We have to tie everything we do back to value. So, we can prove, there's studies, there's a lot of research that diverse teams are better teams, they're stronger teams. So it's not just doing it because we want to tick a box or it feels good or, it seems the right thing to do. There's a shortage of skills, that's a fact.
Yeah.
We need to broaden, this industry. We need to get more people into this industry. Half the population are, not really in this industry. So we need to do things to broaden that. Just because there's a skill shortage. I mean, you'll get better products. There's a skill shortage. We need to do. It's just something that I think we all know we need to do. Yeah.
Okay. Sarath, you've been leading a modernisation in Boral. My understanding of Boral, it's not the most progressive, advanced thinking in terms of its IT environment and things like that. And yet you told to me you consciously developed the people in the organisation, who I would have thought maybe a bit backward in, or not maybe Dickensian even in their thinking. Why did you focus on that rather than overhauling that people with new people who could bring new blood?
It's interesting. I think I was telling Keithy that I actually probably have a very colliding views to him, but surprisingly I'm actually with him here. So it is an interesting journey. Obviously, Boral is, IT is not front of our mind when we're doing business. But I think that the key aspect was that 4 years back when we decided on digital transformation journey, like any other company in this room, I believe that we had the same problem of the talent shortage. And to do new transformation, we needed new skills. But we quickly realized that the cost benefits and the time and the ROIs of investing through a partner fully was not something that was going to be sustainable. So what essentially we did was it was actually quite an upfront and open discussion with our partner that we would like them to come in, bring in the talent, but co-train our staff members who actually had the legacy knowledge and the business knowledge to go together. We in fact went a step further during the transformation journey. We actually hired back some of the people who probably left us in the past, and we actually brought them back. The good things is obviously the goodness of technology can be learned over a period of time. You always have the 70-20-10 curve, so you have 10% guns and 20% extraordinary performers, and the 70% of your team can run the show. But I think over a period of time, it was more driven by the partner, but in the middle, it was a mixed bag. Then we finally got to a point where it's mainly driven by the internal team and less by partner, who more acts as a strategic advisor. So look, to be honest, it was not a set agenda as such. I think it was more of a practical solution for us back then. It was hard to get skills, and pandemic just made it worse. We couldn't get people from where we wanted them to fly from. So it just happened in a way, but definitely it was a conscious decision that we set through, and the fruits are here. I mean, there's a sense of belonging, there's loyalty. We could easily face the Great Recession. I mean, we probably had a natural attrition. Apart from that, it didn't really impact us a great deal.
Yeah. And what Sarath is saying, Kithai, ties in with your research was saying that the success you've seen in transformation is when they take that approach rather than looking for somebody to solve a problem for them. They develop the staff within to do that. Could you tell us a bit about that sort of research that you...
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going beyond the research to the practicalities as well, the biggest challenge that you face in modernization is the resistance to break through how things were done in the past. And that resistance can only be overcome by your internal people that have a vested interest in seeing that outcome through. And I think that is why it is so critical that your internal people, if armed with the skills and the knowledge and supported by the externals, can really lead the charge and lead the way. So I think that is critically important.
Okay. Julie, what do you feel in terms of, I mean, you in the CEO, and you told me outside that you look at the exit of people when they, was I interpreting that correctly? Sorry, you were saying, so I wondered, why people leave organizations rather than participate and develop it.
There's a lot of reasons why people leave organizations, but I definitely think for us, it's about having a purpose and feeling tied to the purpose, making sure everybody is connected throughout your organization to that mission. And I think that really helps with that employee engagement and retainment, and that people are learning. People love to learn. That's why IT is such a fun place to work, because we're always learning. So, if you have capable people that are smart, we want to invest in skilling them up. That's what we want to do. We know we can't get people off the shelf or out of the universities with what we need for the modern enterprise right now, because it's changing so fast. This industry is really dynamic. So we're willing to invest as long as they're smart people, capable people come in, we will train you, and we want to skill up those people. And then you find that loyalty from your employee base when we're investing in them.
Sarath, can you share the timeline? Because you've been on this journey, I think, about 4 years in Boral. So you would have seen people make this transition from some of the older, maybe infrastructure roles in the organization to become cloud engineers. What was involved in their journey?
A lot of hard work, simply put.
Yeah.
It does come with a lot of resilience that's required. And I think, as Julie pointed out, the whole value system and having the belief that we can actually exit the data center, get to the cloud. So there's one buzzword. So I think we had to create that, keep insisting upon the message that yes. So if I speak to anybody in IT at Boral, everybody understands what DCE means. That means data center exit. So that's been a common theme to drive, and the purpose always stayed there. I think that's one common theme that if I look back, that we always kept saying and repeating that word in every meeting, every business stakeholder engagement that we are doing, and we're driving towards a goal. I think people had a lot of tough days. I wouldn't say it just comes on that. So, but taking the risk appetite, I think the major change was the ability to take the risk. Unlike the previous past where I had experiences, it's okay to do certain screen tests. As you would know, this infrastructure was built 20 years ago, and it's hard to know what exactly will blow up when you actually shut down something.
Yeah.
So it's the confidence of the executive to say that it's okay. Make sure your plan Bs and Cs are ready, but make sure that when you trigger that shutdown, you actually are ready to go plan B, but you do need to take the risk. I see the main roadblock being that not taking the risk ability slows you down 4 times of where you want to get to. But yeah, from the people front, you got to trust your people, give them the confidence. We're talking about the guns of the old infrastructure world. Luckily, we have so much information today on learning the new cloud technologies. I guess if you give them the confidence and assure them that they are not off the market, their skills are still marketable, and give them that hope and everything, I think it just comes nicely together.
Kirtha, you're sort of showing that if we look at the roles that exist in an organization, then moving into a modernization journey through cloud, you found at least 47% of those roles are redundant in that modern world. Can you elaborate what you're there?
So it's actually not that 47% are redundant. It's actually that that's what we actually expected to see, right? We sort of went in and we said, oh, look, surely cloud is going to make a bunch of the roles that we have today redundant. But what we actually found was 96% of the roles are actually required. What changes is 2 things. One is the balance and the mix of some of those roles. And the second thing that changes is the way in which they execute their work in that role. So for about 43% of those roles, we actually found that change is extensive. So the upskilling training programs, the way to do upskilling wrong is to figure out how to create more cloud engineers. The way to do upskilling right is to figure out how to make your entire IT workforce cloud capable. And actually, I think to Sharat's point, it's actually about changing the behaviors and the mindset. So culture is a very high level word, but to me, I define culture as the unprompted actions that people take. And when they're faced with a situation, do they take that action in a failure of really coming together and trying to find the root cause and trying to do that true problem management, or do they take that approach of flagging that somewhere, laying blame on the program, and shutting down the program? I can't tell you the number of executives that I've spoken to that said, we had a cloud transformation program, but someone screwed up, someone did this, and then the whole organization was waiting for us to fail.
Okay, but as Kirtan was talking there, Julie, he's talking about you've got to rethink how you do your role in an organization. And that takes people out of a comfort zone. People who may have had a skill set, see their value proposition from being masters of maybe a piece of infrastructure or a piece of, or a service or an application. Suddenly, they've got to jettison that and realize, think more broadly and on the horizons. How do you get people to let go of the past and embrace the new?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we often focus on technology only when we think about modernization and changing things, but it is always about the people and the process as well, and they're just equally as challenging as implementing brand new technologies. And when it comes to bringing our people along that journey, we have to think about their skill sets, their tool sets, and their mindsets. That's what we always say at Cisco. We need them to have the tools, so we make that available, self-service. We have learning platforms. We let people go at the pace they're comfortable with. We celebrate when they do things well, and we let them sort of go on that journey, because everyone's journey is going to be a little bit different. I mean, if you were a CLI programmer all your life, and we're saying, hey, you have to use Python to do programming now, that's a real big change. So, people have different ways of learning, so we have to recognize that, and we have to meet them where they are with bringing them opportunities to learn, right? And experiences and exposure as well. It's not just learning. And we have to make sure we have the right tool sets for them. For the CI/CD tool chain, we want you to go into DevSecOps now. You need to have the right tools that are going to bring everybody together and get adapted to those tools. But the mindset piece is probably the hardest, because I think that's what we underestimated when we first tried to modernize, because it needs to go all the way up through the management. It's not just an engineering or an infrastructure conversation. It's a business conversation as well. The business needs to understand how a cloud operating model works, because we're changing the way we work as we're doing this. And to really reap the capability of this technology investment, we need to change the behavior in line with that, so we'll get those benefits and that value to the company. So, yeah, I would just say it's not one size fits all.
No.
It's nuanced, and we have we have to be ready to listen and
it's an evolution.
Bring our employees along that journey with us, and it's rewarding when you do.
Okay. Sarah, I want to talk to you about how we articulate the value that we provide for an organization and that sort of stuff. We've had a prior discussion, and you said it's not about dollars and cents on this sort of stuff. It's about broader sense of value. I think of Boral as a sort of low margin, or business run by Kerry Stokes, who's one of the hardest businessmen in Australia right now. How do you express value to stakeholders like that?
Sure. Obviously, Kerry owns a large stake in our organization now. I see essentially, this is probably, again, going back to the basics. The customers that we have is, one, the shareholders. The second, the real customers who buy product from our organizations, right? So if we set into these two key foundational staging pillars that we can call it as your stakeholders, then it makes things easy to articulate the value. One is absolutely, I know the infrastructure looks all back-end engine, nobody cares about infrastructure guys in the back-end, right? But the reality is that the cloud transformation has really blurred the lines between the application and the infrastructure. That actually even gets the diversity factor solved, is what I believe, because a lot of people actually can try these new technologies and they have a flair for it. But coming back to the point of the KPIs, the business capabilities needs to have an absolute marriage with the IT capabilities that we want to introduce. Without which, let's talk about, we're talking about 5G technologies that can provide latency, multiple connectivity, and big mega bandwidth. But what's the way to link it to your business outcome? It might not mean anything to them, right? So that was just a random example, but the point is that marriage is so deadly important. So we get to that point, obviously the goodness, I generally define the cloud transformation as 2 bits. One is the hard bit, which is actually taking your legacy to the cloud. And the good bit, or the fun bit, is where you actually exploit the technology for creating this modular use cases for the the organization and then drive value out of that. So obviously, we do need to acknowledge that the technology provides the flexibility and power back to the IT, where we can scale up and down and save your operational cost. So we have to shed the mindset that it's a set and forget thing where you actually have an infrastructure set up and you depreciate it over the next 5 years and you just forget about it. It's not that case anymore. We've got to be on top of it day in, day out.
And that's something, because you were telling me, in the role that people do, it's almost a sort of like an air traffic controller, almost looking at the sort of the movement and the cost and the expenses and the discipline of how things are being consumed in an organization. That must be challenging for people who are just used, as long as things are running, everything's okay, but actually they need to have a greater level of detail to get the value.
Absolutely. It's like any organizational change. We have to go through the journey of reluctance to acceptance. So people will not like it. They won't understand this. But it's a journey. You have to keep insisting. And yes, it is true. It's a daily thing. And when it comes to the business KPIs, it's the time to serve, the flexibility. It doesn't take I'm pretty sure most of us in the room have worked over installing a server. It did take 3 months to get some change request and get through that. It's not the case anymore. It's in a green and a red button powers. You can automate the scripts to the application team. They can fire on their server, get the new use case going up and running in no time. So that's the business side of the time to serve to the real customer is almost how fast you want to think, that's all.
Okay. Kirthi, you said to get the true value, you've got to change the way that IT is done in the business. You can't just lift and shift from an old world into a new world. You've got to actually change your operating practices. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to this point on how do you measure the value as well. The reality is that the starting point that you have is that you're working against almost a negative business case, and you don't do this for cost savings alone. The negative business case is you're actually going to be paying for more expensive talent. You're going to be having dual run costs. You're going to be coming up against locked-in contracts that are often 7 years long. You've got data centers that you can't just shut down whenever you on a whim, right? So all these things are stacked up against you. And the two things that are going to be really important is that your people need to understand that about the lagging and leading metrics. So the leading metrics are going to be about how you work. What are the metrics such as release frequency, the metrics such as the number of times or the number of security incidents that have been identified up front. And all of those practices come together when it comes to the modernization story, right? And the other part is that the CFO and the CEO have to understand that this is a mandate. They need to understand the big picture and the long-term value in this. And they need to understand that this is going to be a really tough journey that you're going to go through. You can't expect just because you see a business case that says 3 years from now we're going to have X amount of savings, that's the reality of what's actually going to happen on your balance sheets. They have to understand that the value comes from risk reduction, the value comes from employee satisfaction and retention. There's a balanced scorecard that you really need to look at this through the lens of.
Okay. Julie, organizations tend to be somewhat impatient. I mean, they've got quarterly reporting cycles. The executive are sort of conscious of expenses in that regard. Kirthi is outlining a sort of world in which you've got to have sort of faith. We're on a journey. We don't expect something, Rome wasn't built in a day sort of type analysis. How do you engage stakeholders in an organization like Cisco that I suspect is a highly competitive organization?
Yeah, we move fast.
Yeah, yeah.
We have to be extremely focused about what we're trying to do and aligned as to what we're trying to do in an organization our size to shift directions. We're big. So having that alignment all the way throughout the organization is incredibly important. And making sure that, the metrics, we're talking a little bit about metrics, the metrics that we have at the top of the company actually filter down throughout and at Cisco, they do, down to the individual level. Every single person has their own metrics, and we publish them out for each other to see. And I can trace those metrics all the way up to the top. So having that connectivity and discipline is really great for making people align and being focused on our top imperatives as a company. What do we have to stop doing, and what do we have to start doing? And making sure that we're using our talent and our resources where they're most needed, on the most important things, right? So as much as we're moving forward in modernization and digitization, we're cleaning up on the back end. We're shutting things down as well. And that's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
We're going through and we have targets like how many applications have we reduced? You know, how many workloads have we reduced? How many vendors have we reduced? All these things we're trying to do to simplify our operation at the same time so that it gives us, you know, we're divesting so that we can reinvest and then we can take resources on that journey forward. And scale them up and keep growing the companies.
Okay. Sarah, through your four-year journey leading modernisation, what are the metrics that guided you? I mean, this is a journey. We're not arrive at a destination, which is an ongoing thing. You need stakeholders to maintain commitment. What are the metrics that you use that reassure you that you're on the right path?
Yeah, I think interesting question. Obviously, this may not sound right to everyone, but it is true that Boral does have a low margin business, so it is important for us to make sure that our financial metrics stay healthy to a point where actually the last phase of transformation actually was funded by the savings we made out of the transformation journey. So on one aspect, we were trying to shut and reduce our costs, and thus costs actually funded the last leg of the transformation. So definitely that was quite an important metric that we actually measured. I know it's not to the contrary of Kirti, but definitely at the same point, we do have certain business initiatives, especially during the pandemic. Like many of us, we had the challenge of shifting the entire office base back into the home. So it's all distributed. So you had the challenge of getting to our employees to make sure that they are actually productive. So being on this journey, that was one of the big wins that we had as a metric that we probably started tracking 2.5 years ago. So that was quite good, and our organization is quite safe hands, like many others, that productivity was never impacted. And now I think we are getting to the part of the fun part, which is more about creating new stuff, and that's probably on the journey now.
Well, that's an interesting point. Just come in there, because you're implying you break the back of the hard stuff and you start to sort of physically see the rewards you're getting from where you've got to. Is that what you're saying in terms of fun?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like going back to what Kirti said, so the talent is so important, and it actually is coming internally. Now, we have two different types of talent. That's what I categorize it as. One is the talent which can actually take you to and transform. And the second part of it is actually being that creative and the inventive mind, which actually can exploit literally the value of the cloud has to offer. So these two are fundamentally so important. And I think we have come to the part we actually are thinking about exploiting that value that the company has to show. We got the skills, but certainly we need more skills, more training, and absolutely that's now part of. Now that we've seen what we have done, I think we kind of have a few learnings on the journey, and now we actually are purposefully making sure that we actually have a solid development plan. And if one thing that I can advise anyone is that we're probably having a development plan along with your cloud transformation strategy is deadly important. It's a non-negotiable one from day zero.
Okay, which is, Kirti, you said to me also, organizations aren't approaching their education programs and uplifting of the skill sets beyond IT with enough urgency to do that. Because Sarath is just talking there about the ability for the organization to think creatively about the environment they've created and exploited. That's not just in IT, that's organizationally. Can you sort of share your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think there's 4 groups of people, right? So I think there's one group which is the people that will deliver your IT services and the practitioners of moving to cloud and the modernization and all of that. There's a second group of people which is almost the users. And I use the term users a bit broadly because today users tend to be developers, but tomorrow, like there's no reason why there is not more in the hands of business, and there's more cross-skilling and cross-functional. In one of my clients, actually, the person who was actually literally coding the chatbot was from the business. And she said, like, I'm perfectly comfortable because I understand what customers are calling up my call centers for. I don't want my developer to, help tell me how to build my chatbot. And then the third group of people, so the users, which they need to understand how to use the underlying technologies. And then the third group of people is almost your shared services, which is like critically important in removing the engineering toil and removing the blockers that get in the way from work being done and still enabling you. So I think about this as people in procurement, people in sort of the folks who are looking after the people side of things, and project managers and service owners and those sort of roles that play a critical part. And then there's the fourth side, which is actually the leadership. Like, it is critically important that the leaders are fully skilled and not just have the acumen, but understand the levers and the journey you're about to go on and all those aspects. In terms of the actual upskilling programs, I think where people get it wrong is when the upskilling program is basically a go and do this course type of approach, or go and do the certification approach. Where people get it right is where that is a part of it, but it is part of an overall learning journey. There's also, before even that learning journey, identifying the pockets of people that you're actually trying to grow. So what are your goals? Is it about cross-skilling? How do you find the people that do have the 3 or 4 experiences that are going to be incredibly potent in leading your organization in the future? The ones that are problem solving, the ones that are managing conflict really well across technical teams, that identifying those people. And then in your learning journey, it is giving them the opportunities to be part of it with on-the-job training. Like, the people that you train need to be in your transformation programs or need to be close to doing the work. And then finally also formalizing it in a way and actually implementing that into your performance management processes and into your feedback cycles as well. So that is a learning journey, and I think the moments that matter is what you need to solve for.
Julie, can I give you the final word in terms of the creativity element? What's your thinking on this?
Yeah, my thinking is that IT, we're a fairly young industry, right? And these skills and these roles and these capabilities are new. So we're pioneers. Like, it's pretty cool. Why wouldn't you want to work in an area where you're pioneers? I don't want to get people that learned it from the book. Yeah, you have to know some stuff from a book. But I want the people that are figuring out the future. Those kind of people are the kind of people that we want in our organization, that are really just thinking that way, that they're a pioneer, we're creating something new, and we're looking for new opportunities that are sort of on the forward end. So, that's just what I think about our industry and learning. You don't tick a box. It's not going to be coming off the shelf. We're going to have to go out there and figure it out.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please thank our panelists for their thoughts?